Jane McCall and the Twilight Stacks. Chapter 2. The Nightmare. When she awoke, she thought she was still in the closet, but no, the area in front of her formed a passage easily twice her height and narrow enough that she couldn't take a full step to either side. Dim yellow light came from the far end, which opened into nothingness. She took a step further in, and her boot sank into a plush black carpet. One step became two, then three, until she was all but running down the hall. A sense of urgency overcame her. Something was wrong, wrong, wrong. Someone she loved needed her help, but she didn't know who or why. As she approached the end of the hall, her dread grew. The carpet went flat and dirty, then crumbled under her feet. Shadows which should have been soothing clawed their way towards her. As if to combat this, the light from the end grew brighter and brighter until it was blinding. Jane should have turned back. She couldn't turn back. The exit was within an arm's length. Light obscured what lay beyond. With a yell that was one part defiance and one part terror, she threw herself out of the hallway and into the void. She fell for a terrifying second and landed hard on top of a pile of rotting wood. The desiccation of the wood saved her. The material had gone soft and fragile enough to disintegrate on contact. What could have been bone-shattering spikes were reduced to a dusty crash pad. There wasn't any pain, but the impact knocked the wind out of her. She took a moment to recover. A few gasping breaths refilled her lungs, and closing her eyes eased the vertigo from the fall. She hesitated to open them again. Contrary to the image she projected, horror movies were not her style. This whole thing was too close to one for her taste. Still, when nothing happened, she cracked an eye. She found herself looking up at an ugly yellow sky. Not a cloud in sight, but the hue reminded her of smog and gave the lighting a sickly cast. Lifting her head revealed an endless plain of toppled bookshelves, discarded books, and shredded paper. She'd fallen on one of the shelves. Splinters dug into her palms and the outside of her thigh. The sensation threatened to hurt, so she got to her feet carefully. Once she was standing, she looked around. The landscape was more of the same in all directions, with no indication of where she'd come from. A tug under her belly button pulled her deeper in, and she staggered forward. None of the strangeness alarmed her. It really, really should have, but for some reason her brain refused to register any of this as atypical. She was stuck in a state of, yeah, this may as well happen. Time passed strangely, moments sticky as taffy one second and thin as oil the next. The horizon remained unchanging as she walked. She kept her eyes on the ground, trying not to step on the papers or twist her ankle. It was an exercise in futility, but it allowed her to see when legible words started appearing on the pages. At first they were nonsense. Pomoginie and Nisaidie and Jiping and Sairaus. Though the meanings evaded her, they were on the tip of her tongue. As she read each one, voices rang in her head. They repeated the words over and over, each with a different accent and pitch. All of them grew louder with each new addition to the chorus. A dozen voices were yelling in her ears by the time sentences in her own language started to appear. "It hurts!" was on a page which crumbled to dust as soon as she brushed it with her foot. It sounded like a young man, and his voice vanished when the text was lost. "Keep them out, safe," had been scrawled on another, brown from water damage. "Bring it back," covered the entirety of a mostly shredded scroll. More and more like that rang out as she picked up the pace. "I love you," was written in a red and gold journal, and to her horror she heard it in her own voice. That last detail was the straw that broke the camel's back. While Jane had been tempted to kill off the noise with wanton property destruction, hearing her own words in the mix was too much. She slammed her hands over her ears, closed her eyes, and burst into a run. She tripped over books, all damaged or defaced. The sensory overload was starting to make her dizzy, and the voices were shrieking. The pull behind her navel hadn't gotten stronger. Her own blind panic drove her flailing forward, limbs uncoordinated. Her ankle gave out. She fell, scattering papers. Her forehead bounced off a book. She opened her eyes. The tugging remained, but all of Jane's attention was caught by the tiny sentence written on the cover of the book she'd smacked into. Unlike all the others, it was in pristine condition. Not a scratch marred the brown leather cover with the silver embossed title. It read, "Return the favor, Jane." Before she could open the book to learn what that meant, the pull grew stronger. She tried to stand, but her arms lacked the strength to push her up. She listed to the side and collapsed. Before she could think more than, "Huh?" the side of her head smacked into a shelf. Unlike the first one she'd landed on, this one had structural integrity. Her skull met wood. The wood won. Everything went black.
Queries, kudos, or concerns?
Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.